University of California, Davis for about 9 years, it looks like. He's been at the University of Florida since about 2008, conducting research in the areas of dairy cattle nutrition, reproduction, biology, and management. So at this time I'd like to welcome Dr. Santos. Really?
I'm going to make more noise than the guys outside, so everybody walks me. That's the goal of that bell there. Otherwise, it is really difficult to get people to come inside again. As Lena already alluded, the person who should have been here today is Charlie Staples, but unfortunately, Charlie is going through chemotherapy. So therefore he's not able, so I'm going to replace Charlie. Hopefully I will be able to tell the story of some of the research that Charlie and his graduate students, or one of the former grad students, Marcus and Obi, and one Volati, some of the experiments they've done in the last few years that pertains to supplemental choline, but perhaps a slightly different story. But I'm going to show you some of the data on cows from experiments at the University of Florida as well as other places, and then some of the data on calves. Well, it was, I think, 2014 or 15 when the University of Florida became involved in choline research with Marcus, and the first paper was published recently in the Journal of Dairy Science. You will see some of the data. And the second manuscript is in preparation. There's an abstract. And in those particular experiments, the experimental design had something that was very consistent. Cows received, and you will see this nomenclature here, choline ion. There's a lot of confusion in the published literature, not because it's a confusing subject, just because people don't report very clearly what they actually fed the cows. Obviously, we feed a product that contains choline chloride, but at the end of the day, we're supplying the cow or the animal is consuming choline element, which is part of the molecule of choline chloride. And in these two experiments, they consume approximately 12.9 grams per day of choline ion. That started before calving, and you continue until 21 days, at least 21 days after calving. So here is the energy-corrected milk yield of the first experiment that's been recently published by Marcus. And one of the things that Marcus showed was that cows were supplemented with rumen-protected choline starting here, a few weeks before calving. They produced more milk. But the milk yield extended above and beyond the period of supplementation, as you can see here. The experiment ended at 105 days postpartum, and you can see that the cows that were fed choline pre-partum, they continued to produce, pre and postpartum, they continued to produce milk even after choline supplementation ceased. So a portion of this experiment was replicated, which is the concept of feeding before and after calving, in follow-up experiment, which is a project that one Volati conducted, and we saw exactly the same response. There's about 45 cows for treatment, and you can see that those that were fed choline before and after calving, they produced more milk, and the response continued even after the period of supplementation, indicating that there are something that's happening to those cows that even after choline is no longer supplied as a feed additive, the cows continue to produce more milk. So we decided to go back to literature and see what is published about choline in the last few years, so we can better understand what's happening in terms of animal responses. So we recently completed a review of literature that it took us some time to find everything that we were able to find that's being published in the English language on choline supplementation. So we were able to identify 21 manuscripts, not all published in the scientific literature. Some are still in the thesis or dissertation, so we contact people to provide that. That contain 23 randomized experiments. So the criteria for inclusion here, and what you're going to see is that cows have to be randomized to dietary treatment starting pre-partum, and the experiments have to be randomized lot design or completely randomized design. So at the end of the day, we were able to identify 74 treatment means, and almost 2,000 cows have been assigned to that. I have to say the data on nulliparous cows is pretty weak, so I'm not going to tell you much about that. I'm just going to focus on the parous cows because that's where the robustness of the data is. So the information we collect were included. The experiments had to provide detailed ingredient and nutrient composition of the pre-partum diets, how many days cows were fed those diets pre-partum, the product that was used to deliver choline in a protected form. It could not be choline chloride feeding, and it could not be an infusion experiment. Okay? The amount of choline ion that was fed, the days that cows received room-protected choline postpartum, milking frequency. So these were all inputs in the statistical model. Okay? The responses that we evaluate included primary intake, or we were interested on. Primary intake pre and postpartum, body weight and body condition score pre and postpartum, productive performance, milk yield, milk composition, concentration of metabolites in blood, hepatic composition, incidence of disease, pregnancy at first AI. I'm not going to show you all the data. I'm going to touch on what I feel that we understand a little bit better, and it's probably the most relevant information at this point. Okay, so just to give you a flavor of what the diets these cows were fed, we entered the ingredient composition of those diets and tried to follow as close as possible the nutrient content of those ingredients to mimic and resemble the diets that the investigators published. Here is the concentration of energy, net energy for lactation. All of these derived from the NRC 2001 software. Okay. So we had 33 treatment means in which cows were fed no choline. So I forgot to mention to you that one of the criteria for inclusion is that every experiment had to have a control group. In other words, 0 grams of supplemental choline being fed to those cows during the transition period. So there were 33 treatment means in which they received no choline. You can see the prepartum diet contained on average 1.57 megacalories per kilogram and about 14% pure protein. Here is the concentration of metabolizable protein in the diet. When we calculate how many grams of metabolized protein divided by the intake of those cows, so 9.2%. Here is essential amino acids, 45% of the metabolized protein, according to NRC for those diets was made up by essential amino acids. Lysine represents 6.6% of the MP, methionine 2%, and the average ratio of lysine to methionine is 3.3. You will see that the numbers are very similar for 41 treatment means in which cows receive choline. There were experiments that there was more than one level of choline supplemented, and this is why there are more treatment means here. So for those that want to see the absolute amounts, okay, so this is the amount of calories cows consumed in the control group, almost 19 megacalories, very similar to the choline group, small difference. They were eating 1.7 kilograms of protein. You can see the range here. We have experiments in which people use cows of lower production, so they ate less before calving. We had experiments in the data set that cows ate 15 or 16 kilograms of dry matter pre-part. So obviously, the caloric intake and the protein intake will be much greater. So obviously a function of how many kilograms they ate. The estimated supply of metabolizable protein was about 1,100 grams on average, but you can see from 700 to 1.5 kilograms. And you can see the supplies of metabolizable essential amino acids, metabolizable lysine, and metabolizable methionine. And here is the intake of choline ion. Obviously, the negative control group will be 0, but on average, the experiments of supplemented choline fed 12.7 grams, but there is a range from 3 to 25 in the supplemented treatment. Okay? So obviously, every experiment has a 0, as a treatment that is a negative control, but within the levels of supplementation, there was somewhat of a range there. Okay, so you're going to see two mathematical approaches to the data analysis. One is that we ask a simple question: does supplementing choline pre-partum and in early lactation affects a particular response, regardless of how much they fed? And that's what some of these forest plots will tell you. Okay? So each row here represents a comparison within an experiment. So for instance, for those who cannot see from the back, this is the reference of one of the experiments in which they fed either a control or a choline. And the comparison here is basically the treated group relative to the control group. The control is always 0 grams of choline ion. That's always the reference for comparison. The central line, the black line that you see here, it means that the difference is exactly equal to 0. Okay? So basically there is no difference between feeding or not feeding choline. The point estimate is the central circle here that you see, and that's the point estimate of the effect of feeding choline in a particular response. In this case, it's dry matter intake pre-partum. The line here is the confidence interval, and if you can see and appreciate, hopefully you can, there is a dashed red line right here. That is the point estimate for the mixed model. Here is the overall effect of the analysis. Okay, so you're going to see several graphs like this, which is basically trying to answer the question: does feeding choline, on average 12.7 grams per day, affect intake, production, milk composition, so on and so forth? And then you're going to see some more of the scatter plots, which comes from another mixed model approach that asks the question: is there an optimal amount of choline that influence a particular response? So in the case of dry matter intake that you see here, there is a somewhat of a consistent response that most of the point estimates fall to the right of the black line, meaning that the intake of cows supplemented with choline was greater than the control group within an experiment. And in fact, the overall estimate is this here: 300 grams more intake for supplemental choline, and because of the statistical analysis, that's highly significant. Therefore, we conclude that supplemental choline actually stimulates intake pre-partum. And for those who are more statistical savvy, you can see here, this is a measure of heterogeneity in the data. We would reject the aspect that the data is heterogeneous. In other words, experiments behave somewhat similarly, and the level of response is somewhat similar. Okay. So, first point here is that supplementing choline pre-partum makes cows, at least based on the current literature, to consume a little bit more feed pre-partum. So what about postpartum? You're going to see the same type of figure, okay? And we have exactly the same type of response. So some experiments measure intake for 3 weeks, some measure intake for 110 days. Okay? And we don't have a way of assessing that very easily in this type of approach. But what you can see here is that on average, cows consume 0.5 kilogram more dry matter during the postpartum period when they receive choline pre-partum. Okay. Now, is there an optimal amount of choline? That's what these other figures are going to try to answer. And you're going to see graphics, you say, this doesn't make a lot of sense to that because dots are scattered all over. And that's because of the random effect of experimented models. There is one thing that affects intake, is different farms. One farm, pre-part intake is 15 kilos. The very next farm is just 12 kilos. Okay? That's the effect of farm. In our case, it's the effect of experiment. They experimented the farm. Okay? And that affects the intercept of the analysis. That's why things here. If I were to fool you, I would show just the predicted response, which fall very close to this line with the beautiful figure, because I would take away the random effect of farm, which causes the biggest component of noise in any data analysis. But the point here is that in this particular analysis, we looked at the linear and quadratic effect of choline, and you will see quite consistent that the responses are always linear. So supplementing choline, starting pre-part, increase dry matter intake pre-part, and you can see that the response is linear. Supplementing choline, from a protected form, pre-part, increases dry matter intake post-part, and the response is linear, at least up to about 25 grams per day, which is where our data ends. So our range of supplementation is from 0 to about 25 grams per day. Okay, so what about milk yield? Obviously, if the cows ate a little more, we hope that they would produce more, and in fact, they did produce more. So you can see that the vast majority of the point estimates fall to the right of the central line, and in fact, the point estimate for the mixed model is about 1.4 kilograms more milk, when the average cow received, starting pre-part, about 12 grams of choline ion in the rumen protected form. And that was highly significant. So what is the responsible level of choline that were fed in different experiments? Again, very similar, a linear response, a linear increase. Although most people would supplement somewhere here, you can see that the slope of the regression is telling us that at least up to about 25 grams per day, milk yield is increasing in a linear fashion. So what about energy correct milk? Very similar response, about 3.5 pounds more milk, 1.6 kilograms more energy corrected milk in the data set. And the response again is linear for both energy corrected milk as well as for fat corrected milk, obviously, because to a great extent, most of the energy in milk is coming from it's a counteracting fat corrected milk. But we see very similar types of response. Okay, so what about fat yield? Cows supplemented with choline starting pre-part, they produce 70 grams per day more fat, and that's the point estimate there. They produce 50 grams more milk protein per day during the period of evaluation. And the responses were linear to both of them, as you can see here. Increasing the amount of choline that was fed to cows, increased fat yield in the database or in the experiments that had been conducted with supplemental choline, and increased also the response in milk protein in a linear fashion. Okay. So if you were to see here a choline square, you would indicate that the response was quadratic, so we would achieve probably a plateau. But in none of this, the quadratic coefficient was significant in the model, or in the models. Okay, so we sort of expect that cows would produce more milk because the individual experiments that people had conducted, obviously, a large number of them had shown some indication of increased milk yield or had shown a clear indication of milk yield. But we were interested also in trying to tease out whether supplementing birth-protected choline to cows starting pre-part would actually reduce risk of disease. And that is a difficult task, and I'll tell you. And the reason is because of two things, which is quite common in literature, it's universal. The first one is that very few people report frequency of disease in their papers. We just don't have those data available. We understand that individual experiments usually don't have statistical power to detect differences. But we need those data to be able to compile eventually, try to make sense whether some intervention that has to be applied individually to the cow has an effect on animal performance or animal health. The second point that's probably more important is that too many investigators drop cows out of the data set because they developed a disease, although the treatment started before them. And that biases the data. And very likely, for a lot of the interventions that we apply with the goal of improving health, that defeats its purpose because the sick animals no longer contribute to the data because they have been removed from the statistical analysis. And if whatever we're doing actually creates fewer sick animals, and now we remove the sick animals because they don't fit our profile, then it probably underestimates the true effect of whatever intervention we are implementing. And there are several examples like that. And choline is no different. People write to the paper, we enroll 85 cows, but 7 cows that is about, that they don't come into any of the analysis. Okay? So, anyways, so let's just go quickly through the health data. This is retained placenta. And you can see that none of the experiments individually can detect an effect. Okay? In fact, every time you see, this is no longer a quantifiable response in terms of kilograms or grams. This is now relative risk of having a disease. Okay? So the central line here represents the relative risk of 1. Therefore, there is no difference between the treated relative to the control. Every time the point estimate is to the right, it means that the treated group had greater frequency of disease than the control. Every time it falls to the left, it means that the treated group had a smaller frequency of the event than the treated group. And you can see that supplementing cows with rumen-protected choline tended to decrease, and you can see the level of significance here, to decrease the risk of retained placenta. How much? The relative risk now is 72% of that of the control group. Okay. In other words, translate this into simple words. If I have 100 cows and 10 of them in the control group develop retained placenta, this data is telling us that if I had supplemented rumen-protected choline, I would have only 8 days of retained placenta as opposed to 10. Okay? That's what this is telling us. Okay? And the data is not heterogeneous. So it's telling that there's probably something happening in retained placenta. So the second disease that we saw some indication of reduction was mastitis, which is probably not something you would think about when you read about choline. You always think about intermediary metabolism, lipid metabolism, okay, fatty liver, ketosis. But we actually saw or found that literature reports a reduction in frequency of mastitis when cows were supplemented with choline starting 3 parts. To our surprise, we did not see any difference in the risk of nephritis, displayed sublimation, and ketosis in the data set. So we were unable to identify differences between the treated and control for those diseases. Okay, but we do have a really nice experiment that teased out the effect of supplementing choline on one particular metabolic problem that affects cows, which is fatty liver. This was part of Marco's PhD work, and he used a model that has been developed by other people to mimic the negative nutrient balance that typically happens in a transition cow with the first or second week postpartum. So in this particular experiment here, he randomly assigned 77 Paris cows to one of 5 levels of rumen-protected choline. Okay. So cows were dried off, and then they had 5 days of ad libitum intake, and then they were put into a diet. Only 31% of the net energy required for maintenance of the cow and for fetal growth. Okay, so they were eating basically 4 kilograms of dry matter a day, so 9 pounds per day. So they're very hungry cows. And the goal here was to really challenge the cows to develop fatty liver. But then during 9 days, cows were fed one of those treatment diets. They received either no choline ion, 6.5 grams of choline ion as choline chloride in the rumen-protected source, about 13 grams, 19, and 25. It was a dose titration experiment. Okay, so for those who want to see how many grams of a product, it's from 0 to 120 grams of Reassure, which was the product that was used to deliver choline. And then Marcus collected liver tissue for biopsy immediately before the feed restriction period, and then at the end of the feed restriction period on experiment day 14. So the idea here is that choline is required for synthesis of phospholipids. So phosphatidylcholine, which is part of synthesis of cell membranes, but it's also a component of lipoproteins that transport lipids in blood and across cells. Okay. So the idea was that can we minimize the risk of fatty liver by supplying these cows additional choline? I just want to make a quick comment here. In all the diets that you've seen here, as well as in all the analyses that you saw before, all of those analyses were done considering the supply of methionine to the cows. Okay? Several of the experiments in literature, people had supplied print with choline, methionine, because they have similar metabolic pathways to the one-carbon metabolism. Okay? Because methionine can be a fuel donor for synthesis of choline in the body. Okay? This was not any different here in this particular experiment. During the feed restriction period, these cows were supplemented with rumen-protected methionine to supply exactly the same amount that was estimated when they were eating the diet ad libitum. So if ad libitum intake, the supply of metabolized methionine was 25 grams, but now we reduce intake to only 31% of the net energy required. Obviously, the total intake of methionine or protein is going to be less. The synthesis of microbial protein would be much less. Therefore, the supply of methionine would be less. You have to confound the data because of the relationships between choline and methionine. So what Marcus did, he supplied the same number of grams using a rumen-protected source. Okay. So this is what he found, was that linearly supplying rumen-protected choline decreased triacylglycerol accumulation in the liver, okay? Which is something that we expect to happen. It was really nice to actually materialize. There were other data that would suggest that this was expected. Perhaps less expected was that we were not able to detect what is the point in which we get the maximum response in terms of reduction in triacylglycerol accumulation. Okay, so that we could perhaps start debating and discussing what is the amount of choline as a rumen-protected product that needs to be delivered to a cow. Rumen-protected choline reduced fatty liver in a linear fashion. And these responses were linear, at least based on the current data set that we have, at about 20 to 25 grams of choline ion, which is, you have to calculate 25% more would be choline chloride, and then whatever the concentrated choline chloride in the product would amount to the amount of product would be equivalent to the amount of choline ion. Okay, so this is the story of the cow, from the experiments that were done here and experiments that were done in multiple universities across the United States and across the world. There's a second story that during the experiments that Marcus and one they did is that perhaps we were not paying as much attention that we should have spent a little more time, which is potential effects on calves. And you just saw a presentation by Frank Van Umbert saying that hey, colostrum has a huge impact. It goes above and beyond providing just immunoglobulins and nutrients to calves. So as most nutrients, if you go back in literature, people actually did challenging experiments in which they induce problems in animals. You will find experiments that titrate the amount of essential fatty acids that need to be fed to a cat. And cats are a good model because they're monogastric, so you don't have the rumen influence the response. So our particular amino acids, and if you look, you're going to find somebody who fed diets that were choline deficient and they cause problems in cats. Okay? So now, milk has choline, or has phospholipids, okay, because milk fat contains that, and any milk replaces that is choline chloride. So every cat is expected to consume adequate amounts of choline once they are born, either through milk or through milk replacement. Okay. But every time we supplement cows with choline, which is what this is showing here, we see an increase in plasma concentration of choline molecules. So there's not a single component that carries the choline ion. There are multiple of them. And here is just some of those that have been quantified in one of the experiments here. So here are the cows that received 0 choline, and here is the average value of treatments that receive increasing doses of a rumen-protected choline product that contain about 21% choline ion. Okay. So you can see that there is this increment in concentrations of choline biomolecules in plasma that actually gets transferred to milk and delivered to cat. And we assume that this also gets transferred to the cat in utero through placental transfer. Although I cannot show you data because we just don't have that. There was an increase in 20% in phosphatidylcholine, single-myelin, and lysophosphatidylcholine. So we do see more appearing in blood and milk. Now, here's the interesting story. In the experiments that were done with a focus on the cows, Marcus followed the calves of those cows to see what happened to those calves once they were born from them to receive supplemental choline during the last 3 weeks of gestation. And in his first experiment, the baby heifers that were born from them that received choline pre-part, they gained more weight during the first 350 days of age. So you can see here 1.77 versus 1.86 pounds per day. Then in the second experiment, the baby heifers that were born from cows that received choline pre-part gained more weight than the ones that did not receive choline pre-part. And you can see the difference. And then there's a third group of calves that the weight gain is a little different because these calves were males and they went through additional challenge. I mean, we'll see what the challenge was with lipopolysaccharide to stimulate an inflammatory response. But nevertheless, they still gain more weight, although it's much less weight, obviously, because we are trying to induce disease in those calves or induce inflammation. But nevertheless, those born from choline supplemented dams, they gain more weight. So there's something there that we just don't understand very well, but it seems that it is can be replicated, at least in these 2 experiments. Okay, so what happened in that first experiment to the heifers that were born from choline supplemented dams? They gained more weight early on. So you can see here the body weight at year of age, and you can see the average body weight in the first lactation they were at the animals. So there seems to be this long-term effect that perhaps comes from changes that took place early on in life during the final stages of fetal development. And you will see there's lots of data that would say that this is essentially real. So here's the body weight. This is the daily body weight that's averaged weekly. So the animals are weighed twice a day after milking. You can see that this heifers gain and were able to maintain greater body weight, probably because they were larger before calves, so they can use them for growth, like the ones that were in growth. There's not very many heifers here, so there's just some indication that there is a long-term effect. They also produce more milk here first lactation, probably because they had less disease in this early period here, but there's only about 12 heifers per group. So there's some indication there are differences from early on in life that carries on all the way to first lactation. But obviously this needs to be replicated. So, in this second experiment, which is the one that I'm going to focus on, that was complete just about a year or so ago, cows were randomized to receive choline during the transition period or not, and then the newborn calves were randomized into receiving colostrum from choline supplemented dams or colostrum from dams that did not receive choline pre-partum. There's going to be, you're going to see this 2x2 factorial arrangement of treatment. Cows were fed either no choline pre-partum or 12.9 grams of choline ion, and then at birth, calves received about a gallon of colostrum immediately after birth, either from dams that were not fed choline or were fed choline. So you have this 4 permutation of treatments here. So there's going to be calves without exposure to supplemental choline in utero, and they are fed colostrum not from them, not supplemented with choline. And these are these baby heifers. So the experiment had 99 cows, but we also had male calves there, which are not part of this data. And then we have a second combination, which is no choline in utero, and then choline that came eventually in colostrum, or the other 2 permutations here. Okay. In utero exposure, no exposure to colostrum, at least from the supplemental source, and then in utero exposure and exposure to colostrum. Okay, so here is milk. These calves were offered about 800 grams of milk solids a day. And you can see that the calves that were exposed to choline in utero, they did not have as much of a depression in milk intake here right that week when they developed diarrhea from whatever agent, Cryptosporidia or Salmonella or something. And so you can see this is right when calves start to show cases of disease. Both groups decrease milk intake. The calves that came from choline supplemented cows pre-partum, they had a smaller decrease in milk intake, and they had a greater intake of starter grain during the first 3 weeks of life. So there's some indication that these calves that originated from them or supplemented with choline were able to respond to whatever challenge that was happening here, which is very common in our farm, that between first and second week. And perhaps they had less of inflammatory response, and we can talk about that. And they were able to not express the same level of depression in milk solids intake or in solid grain intake. So part of that is because fewer animals had a spike of body temperature or sickness behavior. So half of the control calves had fever that was confirmed with some illness, such as diarrhea, whereas here, fewer of them developed fever. Okay, so sickness behavior is probably attenuated. We think it's because that choline has a role in reducing the degree of inflammatory response. Okay, so the second part of that story is, and this is has happened in 2 experiments now, is that dams that receive supplemental choline, the colostrum they produce, fed at the same amount of IgG per calf, results in increased apparent efficiency of IgG absorption. So if you look at this here, this is no choline in utero, no choline in colostrum. In other words, calves were born from dams not supplemented with choline, and the colostrum fed to the calves were from dams not supplemented with choline. Okay? This is no choline in utero. This is colostrum from dams supplemented with choline. And you can see that in both cases, there is an increase in the calculated efficiency of IgG absorption by those calves. So there's something that the colostrum that's coming from these cows that receive supplemental choline is facilitating absorption of macromolecules that are appearing in blood, seen in blood. Here's the other experiment in which we have exactly the same treatment arrangement. But now these calves went through a challenge period. So these are animals that came from exactly the same experimental design, but these are the male calves, not the female, which we are allowed to do a few more things that probably are not very good things for growing heifers, but we can do with bull calves. So in the case of these bull calves, they were born from dams that were supplemented or not with choline pre-part, and they receive or not colostrum from dams that were supplemented with choline. And then at about 2 weeks of age, they went to an LPS challenge to induce this massive inflammatory response that is not enough to kill the calf, but it's enough to stimulate an acute phase response. Okay? So calves were placed in this individual pens. Intravenous catheter was placed in jugular vein for extensive blood sampling. Calves were challenged with a fixed amount of E. coli LPS that induces inflammation, spikes fever, and causes sickness behavior. And then blood was taken sequentially to quantify responses that we believe would indicate whether the animal had a more intensive or a less intensive inflammatory response. And you will see what was measured. These are some of the things that were measured. So the whole concept here is that bacterial components of the cell wall can activate resident cells in tissues such as macrophages that communicate with the remainder of the immune system by secreting molecules that are signaling molecules. And here are just some of them, such as tumor necrosis factor alpha or interleukin. And there are many of those molecules. This cytokines that will alter nutrient partition, will stimulate the inflammatory response with the ultimate goal, hopefully, of containing an infection. Obviously, in our case, we didn't cause an infection. We just gave components of the bacterial cell wall that stimulates inflammation, but without a causing agent that causes tissue damage and infection. But this can stimulate the hypothalamus to produce prostaglandins that will alter the set point of body temperature, so the animal has fever. Okay? It can alter metabolism affecting the muscle that will increase, for example, concentration of free fatty acids in blood, or prenatal histidine in blood. Or you can alter how the liver perceives an inflammation. The hepatocytes will start to secrete anti-inflammatory proteins such as ceruloplasmin, haptoprotein, to contain the inflammation infection. Okay. So our thought was that if choline is having an inflammatory effect, it should attenuate the response to LPS. Okay. So these are, in blue again, will be calves that are born from dams not supplemented with choline, and the orange are calves that were born from dams supplemented with choline pre-part. So this is rectal temperature. So if you give LPS to calves at a certain dose, you're going to cause hypothermia. And that's exactly what happened here. But you can see here that the calves that were born from choline supplemented dams, they had smaller increase in rectal temperature compared to the calves with the control group. The markers measure respiration rate and pulse, and you can see that respiration rate was greater in the calves originated from dams that were not supplemented with choline pre-partum, compared with calves that were born from dams that received choline pre-partum. So very typical disease or sickness response. So you had an increase in body temperature, you can have typically an increase in pulse and respiratory frequency, but in the case of the choline supplemented calves, these increments were less compared to the pro calves. This is TNF alpha concentration in blood after LPS, and you can see that choline supplemented calves had smaller concentration of TNF alpha in plasma compared to the control animals. And obviously TNF alpha is one of the signaling molecules that's going to activate immune cells to migrate to tissues. It's going to induce an acute phase response by the liver, and you can see that because there is less of those cytokines, calves born from choline supplemented had a smaller response in terms of haploglobin, and there's another acute phase protein here, serum amyloid A. Both had exactly the same profile. Pro calves, a greater increase in the concentration of acute phase protein compared to calves that were supplemented with born from them supplemented with choline. And there's lots of data in other species showing that choline does have this ability to not only affect intermediary metabolism as a component of phospholipids, but also have effects on immune cells and attenuate immune response, inflammatory response. So concentrations of cortisol were less in the animals after the challenge when they originate from them that were supplemented with choline. So as a general response, calves that the 20 calves that were in this group here compared to 20 calves that were in this group, the ones that received choline or were born from them with choline, they had a less exacerbated inflammatory response, which we think is important because it will conserve nutrients, will reduce the partition of nutrients to fight infection, and will preserve nutrients that are important for growth of the calf. So this calves, obviously, when you challenge them with LPS, not only do they have sickness behavior in terms of their body temperature, etc., they also have anorexia. But the calves originated from dams that were supplemented with choline. They consume more dry matter. The days following the challenge, they actually gain also more weight in the following week after the challenge, indicating that if this were to be a real disease process, perhaps the intensity of disease would be attenuated when calves have been exposed to choline or pre-burn. So just to summarize my presentation, so supplementing room-protected choline pre-partum influences colostrum and calf performance. We don't know necessarily the mechanism, okay? So this needs to be worked out in more details. There are increments in the content of choline molecules in plasma, which probably gets transferred through the placenta to the calf, but definitely there are increments in colostrum and milk that the calf is going to see if it's fed at colostrum. There is an increase in the transfer of IgG, so passive transfer is improved. It seems to attenuate the inflammatory response based on the LPS data that I just presented to you. So we think that this might benefit can help, although we don't have the experiments to really demonstrate this at this point. So, but given the responses that we've seen, I think you would not be surprised that if we see perhaps less morbidity in calves when they originate from them supplemented choline. So with that, I'll thank you. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions.
A couple quick questions for Jose.
But one important component of that is innate immunity. So when innate immunity is enhanced at that period, usually the ability of leukocytes to migrate to the attachment sites in the parenchymal cotyledon is enhanced, leukocytes produce proteolytic enzymes that degrade that. So one possibility is that if choline is having effects on immune cells, there is a possibility that is affecting the ability of the dam to recognize fetal tissues that are foreign to the animal at that stage. That's one component. Second one is that animals that usually undergo more exacerbated inflammatory response, okay, or more stress, they tend to have more retained placenta. Okay. So it's possible that choline is attenuating a less coordinated inflammatory response that preserves immune cells to attack sites of, that need to be attacked. So these are all hypothetical scenarios at this point. So we know very little what causes retained placenta by itself. We know nothing about how choline plays a role on it. It's all speculation at this point.
Another quick question? All righty. Let's thank Jose one more time.